Hey guys, welcome back. It is your favorite Gimp with a Limp, and I'm here with a special treat for you all. One that they were nice enough to send to me. This is Second Fallujah. This is out of Paper Wars by Compass Games. Now, just in case you don't know, Paper Wars is their magazine subscription that they have. It always comes with a game and then a selection of articles. This one is based on Battle of Second Fallujah, obviously, which, if you haven't, make sure you check out some coverage I did for 6 Days in Fallujah. The video game, it's actually on PC now. That company was nice enough to send me a code, and I know they were only nice enough to send me a code because I actually served there. But really great job. They did a awesome job with it, and I'm actually going to try to buy them a copy of this so I can send them that in gratitude so they can try the board game version of the video game they created. But now I get to show you the board game version of the video game I have been playing. So as we look at the table here, you guys see that I have it all set up for Operation Phantom Fury. And they've done a relatively good job here for all the counters and everything being one sheet, right? So it's magazine game. Now I have clipped these with the exception of the little marker counters for the different areas. I clipped all the unit counters, so that's why they're rounded. I'm a clipper, it's what I do. But the cool thing is here that you see this is actually the map of the city. It's the actual map of Fallujah. You got the Euphrates River over here, the Cloverleaf over in this direction, and my base camp, right? So I did a lot of traveling in this area, okay? And I'm going to try not to get distracted into telling stories because I always start telling stories when I play a game set in this area. But I was sitting there thinking about it. I'm like, all right, you know, looking at the map, I'm like, this is MSR Michigan. I'm tracing it out and they've got it right there, MSR Michigan. I'm like, oh, that's so cool. Seeing, you know, shit that I did and it's right there on the board. But yeah, this was our main service route right here through the middle of the city. And for the life of me, I cannot remember what we called the MSR that surrounded the city. So if you're looking at the map here, all right, so there's one major road that goes all the way through. And this was shitty bridge right here. This was bad. They did some bad stuff on that bridge. But regardless, it goes all the way through, cuts the city in half, basically, all right? And there's another service route that goes kind of around the city. And if we wanted to go to Ramadi, we would actually circle around. You could see a little bit of this highway over here, kind of near my dice tower. And it will come around here and shoot across the top of the city and then over in that direction. So Ramadi was over there, but my actual base camp, there's this little clover leaf right here at the entrance to the city. We had some checkpoints right here, right, as you were coming into the city proper. And our base camp was just over here, just off map is actually where it was. And sorry, I'm bumping that over the camera. The area that I got blown up, the tits as we called it, was just off of this cloverleaf off in that direction. So literally just off map is actually where I got blown up, but they were blowing up shit all along this area, especially right here. There was a main checkpoint, like I said, coming in off that cloverleaf. And we did what we called the milk run coming in through here because we had a main base camp. And I think it was this compound. I think. I can't remember, and looking at the map, I wish I had noted down exactly where it was. And I was trying to look at the map to determine if that's the one that I'm thinking of. It might not be, but I remember it was a big rectangle and it had a main gate to get into it, had a handful of buildings. There was a small little outbuilding that I was tucked in the corner. And I think it was this one. I remember it was right there in the middle of the city is where we were stationed, right? So it should be that one. That looks right and about as far in as we would have to go. This area it's kind of like any main street that you would find in America, except very dingy and dirty. I don't mean to say that, but everything there was covered in dust. Everything. It's desert. And it's not dust like sand like you would go to the beach, gritty sand. It was like talcum powder dust. That just, ugh, I still have bags that have sand in it. But that like light brown dingy color, kind of like the map color here, covered everything. That's why everything is tan, because it's all covered in this layer of crappy dust that just gets into your pores. It's just nasty. So, like I said, this is Fallujah. This is set during the battle for Fallujah from 8 to 14 November, where they pretty much just came in the top of the city and just started taking out everything. And that's what effectively that you're trying to do here. And the sides are very, very asymmetrical in how the combat's going to be played out. And it's actually the first time I've ever seen this in a game, at least that I can think of, in the fact that your friendly units do not get taken out, right? So our Marines here, Marines are the tan units. They do not get taken out. The blue ones, which are the Iraqis, they don't get taken out. The army units, which there aren't too many of those, thankfully, they don't get taken out. I actually ran into a buddy of mine that I went to college with. When I was in Fallujah, I got a call at the COC, pick it up, and they're like, yeah, there's a lieutenant wanting to talk to you. And I'm like, what lieutenant wants to talk to me? And I pick it up, and it's my buddy from college. And I'm like, John, what's up, bud? Hey, how you doing, man? You know, I'm just sitting here shooting shit because this is a fraternity buddy. We're yapping. And they're like, why is he talking to an LT that way and an army LT that way? I was like, no, I went to college with this guy. It was, you know, just nice to hear the friendly voice. Hell, I can't remember where he was stationed. But yes, there were some army guys there, but we didn't need the army guys. This is a Marine thing. Your friendly units, your Marines and the like, they are not going to get taken out. They incur political points, political backlash, and that's kept track of over here on our little political backlash board, and that's also where you keep track of your victory points, your impulse track, your game turn. And if you do bad things, so if you are conducting combat around the mosque, which as you can see, there are freaking mosques everywhere. This is what drove us freaking nuts, man. Not just at these buildings, but all these brownish, reddish brown buildings here that you see spread across the map. All of them have damn speaker towers on them. And then they had the towers all over everywhere else. And they're 5 times a day at least broadcasting these prayers. And it drove us nuts hearing that stuff constantly, just all throughout the day. It's maddening. And of course, you're not supposed to conduct combat operations around the mosque because it's a holy site. It's bad PR and all that good stuff, but they love putting RPGs and AKs in the mosque because we wouldn't go into the mosque, and that was a great place for them to store their ammo. But if they're storing stuff in there, then it's now a military objective, and we can go into it, but we can't go into it to find out that they have the weapons in there. It's circular politician type logic. It doesn't fit. All the bad guys here, all spread across the board, they can be taken out, but they're almost infinite in the fact that they can keep respawning. We have cadre units that you see here, stats of 2, 3, 2. The first number is going to be your combat number. Second number is going to be your movement points. And the backside is when they're spent. When they're spent, it will go down. And it's the same for your units. So if we look at one of my Marine units here, this is 3-1 Marines. This has 6 combat factors, 7 movement points, and only 3 on the backside, but there are multiples of them, right? So if we have the whole battalion together with their weapon team, grab their little weapon team here. All right, so we have India, Lima, was that Kilo, and then their weapons team, which gives a +1. That gives them a bonus, so they get the bonus from the weapon team, and then they get the bonus on top with having the whole battalion there all in one area. I almost said hex area, working together. But really, you're going to be looking at that combat number, and it's going to be 2d6 rolls. You are going to have to supply your own dice because obviously they don't come with magazine games. But that's fine because I do have my gravity dice still out from my previous playthrough. And as you're doing this this combat, you're going to be going back and forth on impulses, okay? So it's going to start off with the coalition first, but then it's going to go Iraqi, or I'll say insurgent because there were some Iraqis, but insurgents. It's going to be the bad guys going and then the good guys. And you're not guaranteed your next impulse. There's actually a rule with this one, with the 2d6 rolls. First time the coalition does their combat round, that 2d6 roll is compared to what impulse you were on your track. And if it is under that, then this turn ends and you're going to be going into the next phases and the next turn. I like that. I really do like games like this that do things where tomorrow isn't guaranteed. Your next turn isn't guaranteed. World at War 85 was a very good example of that, in the fact that you weren't guaranteed the next impulse with a formation. So your battle plans couldn't be set in stone. Same way here, in the fact that early on, you're more than likely going to get at least a few turns out of it. But if you get a really low roll, boom, you're not going to have that. And you're going to kick over to the next game turn. So effectively what this does is it gives the Marines a indeterminate amount of impulses to try and push their objective. And in this, you see it starts off all in insurgent control. That's what the little yellow circle means. And then obviously the star for the Americans on the other side. So what you're trying to do is you're coming in from your two entry zones here, the Eastern and Western, or which one? Western and Eastern, excuse me. Zones, and there's different forces that are assigned to each side, and they're going to start pushing down south, taking various areas and gaining points for that. The Hajis start with 83 victory points. So they start with a maximum amount of victory points. However many victory points they still have at the end of the game determines whether or not they win the game or not. So your level of victory is, if they have 35 points or greater, it's a major insurgent victory. 26-35 is minor. 25 or under is going to, or 25 is going to be a draw. 15 to 24 is minor coalition victory, and under 15 points is a major coalition victory. So in essence, as you take points, take control away from the insurgents, the coalition's point value is going to go up. Insurgents is going to go down. So you want to gain control as much of the map as possible. This type of gameplay lends itself wholeheartedly to solitaire play, in the fact that you're really focusing on the forces that you're controlling, and it's how best to use those forces to gain control of the most valuable areas and retain control. Because like I said, the insurgents, they're going to keep popping up, and the key thing they have access to is just buttloads of militia. Now they have militia with the M, the cadre with the C, and then Fedayeen troops that have a normal NATO infantry symbol listed down for them. They are the most powerful ones on the board, and they have the ability to actually dig in and kind of entrench an area as well. So that's how this game is going to play out. You're going to start with the coalition when you start the game, but then go back and forth on your impulses. Like I said, impulses aren't guaranteed. Depending on rolls, you could get a bunch of impulses or might not get that many in a turn. And you're going to go through your 7 different turns. And when you hit November 14th, which is strangely enough, my birthday, cool. That's going to trigger the end of the game when you finish out the impulses for that turn. But like I said, you can't just guarantee. It's not like you just move through an area and own it. The insurgents have the ability to basically pop militia up back in your back lines. So as the forces, the coalition forces, are coming down and taking control of areas, they effectively have to leave garrisons behind. And this is something you deal with in real life, especially in Fallujah. You couldn't just leave the area unoccupied. You had to occupy it. Marines are not good occupiers. We're good fighters, but we're not good occupiers. And as you're playing the game, you have to leave specific forces. Now, there are different forces that are effectively support units. So like our weapon team here, they give a bonus to an offensive value, but that means they're not really good at controlling an area. So support teams like this, they don't really get to control it. To garrison it, you have to leave your actual combat troops, ones that actually have a combat value. This one, you see, these are some engineers. They have a combat value. Engineers are great too. They do such good work. Not as high as some of the companies we got over there, but they do have a combat value, so they could garrison an area. With that, we have things like our special forces Iraqi guys here, they have a combat value that's in a parentheses. This means that they are not able to lead an attack. They can support an attack and they can garrison an area, but they can't actually lead the attack on their own. They have to have other units with them supporting them, so they can basically give a little bonus. All right, they're kicking butt, but they're not kicking butt on their own. Also, with units that have that parentheses, it means that they can't enter an enemy-controlled area by themselves. They have to have another regular combat unit to be able to enter an area. So as we're going along here playing the game, and we're going to play through a small portion of it, let you guys see how the combat works and how the impulse system works. As you're going through, you're going to be basically leaving behind little breadcrumbs of your troops. Now, you don't have to worry about your troops dying because none of the coalition forces counters can be taken off the map. That's cool. And what it effectively represents is the fact that during this week of combat during Fallujah, yes, they took casualties, but they didn't take significant enough casualties to represent counters actually being removed from the board. So their combat strength stayed high enough that their counter would not have been taken off. The insurgents, however, they're completely different. Every time they conduct an attack, they come off the board. They're just done. So when they attack, they die. But like I said, they get to keep just throwing troops into the meat grinder. Their goal is to cause havoc, cause damage, cause some injuries. Whatever they can do is delaying tactics, basically guerrilla type warfare against the enemy. And again, it's causing political backlash against the coalition forces, especially if they're doing it around mosques, which are sensitive sites, and all that other good stuff. Okay, so the game's going to be played out in a sequence. You're going to have your action phase to start with. Action phase is the combat phase, right? Just where we're going back and forth on the impulses. There's a regroup phase. During the regroup phase is when you have the chance, both sides, to move forces around the board into different areas to try to gain a better position for the upcoming turn. Infiltration phase is something interesting. It's what I was telling you guys about previously, where the coalition forces have to have areas garrisoned, because if they do not have areas they control garrisoned, or they only have support troops there, then militia can come in and they can take those areas back or cause havoc in the back lines. So you have to have strong lines as the coalition as you're moving down. You finish it up with a reset phase, which is what you've basically seen. You're counting your victory points and flipping your units back over from their spent side to their go side. Thankfully, though, that is not everything that the coalition has to use against it. They do have a Riverine unit, which I didn't even know we had over there. Riverine unit of Marines, they get to add +1 as a combat value. They will get spent if they get used and not be able to use it again until next impulse. And it will be over here against the Euphrates. So they can do this in any area that is adjacent, as long as Marines or Army guys are conducting a combat action over here on this side, then they can incur their little bonus, but they become spent. You also have the ability to conduct fire missions. Fire missions are, off-board artillery, essentially. Mortars, like, you get to call them in. You can call these in multiple times. So that's freaking awesome. The coalition can just keep dropping rounds as much as they want, which is great. You can kind of clear out the enemy, but that can incur political backlash if you conduct it in a zone with a mosque that doesn't have friendly troops in there as well. So basically, you got to risk your own stuff. You can't bomb your own guys, but you do have to have people there. You can't just spend all your impulses just walking a line of artillery in on the enemy and clearing everything out. But this is a great thing to have. Gives you an 8 firepower, basically an 8 combat strength attack against a certain area. You do also have the ability to use an advantage. You can use it to gain a modifier +1 or a reroll, something like that. Only thing is, if you use it, it starts in the hands of the coalition, but as soon as they use it, it flips over to the side of the insurgents, and then you can go back and forth using it if you want. For me, I would probably hold on to it, not use it unless it was a dire circumstance against the enemy. Now, something really, really cool that I do like that they did, and I mentioned that this game is very, very good for solitaire play. And it's because in a rule book that's only a handful of pages, really, they have a lot of rules on how to operate the insurgents. It really is conducive for solitaire play. And the fact that it's almost like a zombie game, and the fact that you just have all these overwhelming odds on one side, just masses and masses of bodies, and you have to use your select troops that are crack fighters as good as possible to take control of as many areas as you possibly can, and then hold those areas. This gives you a sequence of how to use those forces, those zombies, all right, for lack of a better word. Sets of roles, things that you can do as priorities for the enemy. That way you can determine how they're going to react, and it gives you some randomness that you need when you're playing games like this. All right, so I've been talking about it a lot. Let's play through a few impulses, let you guys see how it works, and we'll kind of call in a little fire mission. We'll move some troops in, move some stuff around, leave some areas garrisoned. That way you guys can see how the game itself is going to be played. And I gotta say, yeah, this one definitely strikes me as one that's worth getting, especially considering the cost is very low for the price of entry, and you get the magazine subscription on top of it. So that's always a cool thing. Before I forget to mention, the areas across the map, you'll see that there are white circles, green squares, and orange, yellowish, we'll call them orange triangles. Those do represent things. There are 51 of them spread across the map. The white circles are basically regular areas. It's just, that's a spot. The green squares are ones that have a mosque present in them. And the orange triangles here, these are objective areas. So those are the most valuable spots that you want to go after. So like the government center here in the center of town, you want to take control of that area. So that will come into play when we start talking about like objective victory points and the like. At the end of the game, you want to have control of those areas as much as possible. So when it comes to setting up the game, you're going to place out all the control markers. They're all going to go face down because it all starts off in Haji control. Then you place your cadre around. They go in every place that has a mosque in it. And then also in Jolan district over here, get them. And then you have to place a Fedayeen, which remember the Fedayeen are your counters that look like NATO symbols. 3-3 counters, 3 movement, 3 combat. They go in every area that has a 4 TEM. That's your terrain effects modifier, I believe is what they call that. Basically, it's how defensible is the area. Before you get to start playing the game, and I did leave this part to get on film, you have to go through the rest of the areas and conduct a roll, all right, for your insurgent setup. Anything with a 2, so like here's a 2, here's a 2, that's a 3, 2. Any area that is a 2 or a 3, you're going to conduct a roll. If it's a 2 and you roll a 1 to 5, you don't place anything. If you get a 6, then you place a Fedayeen. If it's a 3, all right, 3 terrain effects modifier instead of 2, then it's more likely to have a Fedayeen, and it's 1 to 3, nothing, 4 to 6. You have to place a guy. So let's do that real quick. We're going to start down here at 1 and then walk our way around. I do like the fact that they numbered this. It does make it easier. Like I said, it goes all the way up to 51, which is right here because the numbers kind of go around like this till you hit the center of the city right here at 51. So we're going to start left and work our way around. All right, so it is just that easy. I went along through, I'm sure I probably missed 1 or 2 through it because there are 50 some spots, but we got them all. Only a handful of Fedayeen actually got placed. Got a few down here along the bottom and then some more over here. Any areas that already were TEM4 already had some Fedayeen troops placed into them, some cadre troops placed into them. So pretty well good to go. Now we are at the part where we start with the first coalition impulse. So they get to start, And effectively here, you can either activate an area, and this is roughly the same for the insurgents. Theirs is a little bit different, or an entry zone. So the insurgents can't activate an entry zone. The coalition can. If you are coalition and you are activating an entry zone, you can activate up to 8 units. If you activate an area, you get to activate all the units in that area, right? There is a stacking limit, which is generally 8 for the Fedayeen and Cadre. It's only 5 fresh units. They can have more that are spent, but they can only have up to 5 that are fresh. All right, so basically, as the coalition, I get to start, and I need to pick which one of these areas that I want to activate. And looking at it, could come in here. That's an objective area. I definitely want to take control of that. Okay, so looking at this, let's do that. Let's go into Ascan South here. Actually, can I go in there? I don't think I can. I was looking at it, looked like this went down far enough, but I don't think I can go into that area. Oh, that's so sad. That's so sad. That's all right. We'll go into a different area instead. We'll come in here at the north. Yeah, it would make sense to be able to start right adjacent to a victory point. All right, so for our first activation, we're going to activate a bunch of army units. So I've got just a mixed bag of mechanized and armored units, and then an engineer that I'm going to bring in as well and leave him behind so he can gain control of this area and retain it and use it kind of like a funnel, right, as I bring troops in. So because there are no cadre in this area, it's not a mandatory attack, you see? However, there are cadre that are adjacent to it right here and here. They have the chance to react to them coming in there, and they can change the movement point cost. Remember, there are movement point costs here. To enter this area and gain control of it costs 2 movement points because it's an empty enemy controlled zone. Empty enemy controlled zone, I can move into it, but it costs me 2 movement points. All these units should have 7. Oh, wait, mechanized has 10. But the guy I'm leaving behind has 7, so it doesn't matter anyway. So these guys have effectively 10. He takes control. They've spent 2 movement points, but that could change depending on the reaction of these adjacent cadre units. They get to roll on this little chart here, cadre in adjacent area. And you're going to roll a 2d6 and add whatever their terrain effects modifier is to determine what's going to happen. All right, so there's a little list here on it. And these guys, remember, they have to be fresh too. So if the cadre were spent, flipped over, we would not be doing this. But we do have 2 fresh ones. They can potentially be here. This one has a 1 and this one has a 2. So we'll do the 1 here first. So he effectively is rolling 2d6 and adding 1 to it to determine what's going to happen on this chart. So let's do it real quick. See what we're going to do. He got a high roll. He got effectively an 11. So he's adding 1. He's got a 12. 12. Oh, crap. He's got a lot. Looks like we're going to be adding a Fedayeen. Place a Fedayeen unit in the reaction area. If not possible, ignore. Fedayeen placed by cadre reaction themselves do not react. Plus, it looks like adjacent Fedayeen. Place a Fedayeen unit in the area with the reacting cadre, if possible. Otherwise, ignore. So we will place a Fedayeen unit there, and we will also place a Fedayeen unit with him, because both of those are possible. We're not violating stacking limits or anything. So you can see very quickly how things can change, because now we've discovered enemy units. Plus, this means that we spent more movement points than I originally thought. You don't get to spend just the 2. Now it counts as moving into an area with fresh Fedayeen units, which, how many is that? I think it's 4. Yeah. Fresh enemy units, and that means we have now spent 4 instead of the 2, because we could spend more right later, but now that we have a fresh unit, this fresh Fedayeen unit, and we haven't even reacted for this guy yet, we still got to react for him, changes that up to a 4, and that throws us off. Plus we got to have a mandatory attack against this guy. So let's go ahead and roll for our other cadre and see what reaction he had. And I'm bumping things around with this. He got a 5, which means he is going to have a 6. I might have to just roll on the table. I have my little thing, little dice tray. All right, he got a 6. He gets an adjacent militia. So he gets to place a militia unit with him. All right, so not too bad. Here's the thing. Now we have to have a mandatory combat against that Fedayeen unit that is up there in that entry zone. If we are able to defeat him by a significant enough margin that we cause an overrun, we can continue moving in. However, if we don't, all my guys become spent. That's bad. So let's hope we crush him on this little attack here. All right, so effectively how combat's going to work, it's relatively simple. You're going to do a 2d6 roll for each side. We'll use the blue as the Hajis, we'll use the red as the Americans. The Americans get to add whatever their combat value. You get to add whatever your lead unit is, right? So we can pick any one of the 6s as our lead unit. You get a +1 for each supporting combat unit, okay, that is there with you. Infantry or mechanized adds a +1. We also get a +1 for having an engineer supporting the battle as well. So that's +3 right now for those guys. So 6 + 3 equals 9 plus 2d6. The Hajis get their lead defensive unit, whatever that is going to be. For them, it's going to be 3 for the Fedayeen, and then they get to add the TEM, which for there is a 2. So they have a 5 compared to the 9. So they'll add 5 to their dice, their 2d6 roll, and then we'll add 9 to our 2d6 roll, and then compare, right? You want to win. Whoever wins gets the higher result, and generally is going to inflict casualty points on the other. All right, so here's what we got. We didn't get too great a result, actually. They got, the Americans got a 5. We add 9 to that, gives us 14. They had 5 plus 5 equals a total, was it 10? Yeah, 10. No, they had 6, 11, whatever. It doesn't matter. My math is bad, so bad. All right, so they had 11. That is a win for the coalition, and it means that the Hajis are going to incur as many casualty points as the difference between the two results. In that case, that's going to be a 3, and they have to suck up 3 casualty points. Now, it does tell you how you have to do that, to allocate the casualty points down. For us, it's going to be real simple. We do have enough points to just flat out wipe out the Fedayeen unit here, so he is taken off the board. Sadly, we did not get enough for an overrun. I think an overrun, yeah, if we had caused 1 more casualty point. We need more than they can actually absorb. To take out a fresh Fedayeen unit, it takes 3. We only had 3. Sadly, that's not enough to cause an overrun. If we had 1 more left, we would be able to continue on. We would still have movement points left that we could actually use. All right, I wanted that because I wanted to keep moving and causing more reactions, but that's all right. We'll skip on to the Haji turn. But that means that all of the units here become spent and can no longer move on. That is just sad. Such a slow start. So all the army guys, they pushed into the first district. They took out the Fedayeen that were there. These guys reacted and they built up. So as you're seeing, as you start moving in areas, the areas around you are going to react to that. And they're going to react to it in the areas that you're in as well. So you can't ever really count any area in this game as empty. It's always going to start filling up with troops. And remember, the coalition gets weaker as they go on. You can easily start off with these big stacks with all these good bonuses going for you, but you're going to be leaving troops behind as you go, losing those bonuses. So if I leave those engineers, well, that's 1 + 1 I'm losing for the next attack. And then I could spread these guys out and attack 3 different districts later on in a different impulse. activate this area, spread them out, send them in different directions. But now I've lost all those bonuses and I just have their combat value. Yes, I'm hitting more areas, but I'm hitting a lot more areas in a weaker fashion than I would have been previously. The neat part, though, is that the game is modeled in such a way that it does reflect that militia are not very good. So if a militia becomes spent, they're not just zero, right? So they're already zero at a combat value anyway. They really don't add anything, but they actually become a negative if they become spent. They apply a -2 to the area that they're located in. So militia they can cause problems by attacking your ungarrisoned areas and taking control of them, but they're not really a combat threat. They're more of a presence threat. Remember, they're in there just to poke and cause problems. All right, we're going to jump right back in. I had to break away for a sec for a quick moment, take care of the kids, but let's show a little bit more of the game. Now, just completed the Coalition Impulse, so now we are going over to the first impulse for the bad guys, the Hajis. You see I've got it flipped over to the Haji side on impulse track number 1. Remember, we need to keep track of our attacks. Right now, my attack roll for that was way higher, so it's definitely not going to be under 0, so I don't have to worry about it. Really not going to have to worry about it until we get a couple of impulses in, but you do need to keep track of that first attack during the Coalition Impulse when they are doing their things. And if you don't do an attack that impulse, because you don't have to as the Coalition, then you're going to take and roll 2d6 at the end of your turn, so you make sure and determine whether or not there is going to be another impulse. Because remember, tomorrow isn't guaranteed. The next impulse isn't guaranteed in this game, which I really do like that system. Is innovative. You might have a bunch of turns, but then again, you might not. Well, not turns, rounds, impulses. And then you'll go on to the next game turn. So you're thinking to yourself, what do we do for the Hajis, all right? Because there's a bunch of them on here on the board. What are they going to do? Like I said, there's this whole innovative system about the Insurgent Impulse, and that's one of the reasons I was saying this game is really good for solitaire play. Yes, you can play it heads up, but I think the system they've designed here, right, for the solitaire play is so good that it really is better solitaire than it is heads up, I would think, because just the way that it plays, you're so focused on what the Coalition is doing and everything is revolving around the Coalition forces that it really doesn't make sense to have someone handling the other side. Now, yes, of course you can do it heads up, but it's just so good solitaire. Anyway, let's go ahead and look at it. We do have to see if there are certain conditions being met, and that's going to determine what's going to happen with our Insurgent Impulse. I got to stop calling them Hajis. That's what we called them when I was overseas, so it's like wrecked into my brain. Anyway, and just as FYI, this is my own personal thoughts on it. I think that people do that, right? Enemy soldiers do that in combat situations. So like you had Jerry, right? In World War II, you called Germans Jerry, or I forget what they called the Japanese soldiers off the top of my head. Vietnam, you had Charlie, you had some word you used for the enemy. And I've always thought of that as a way to dehumanize the enemy, because you can't think of that as someone's brother, someone's father, someone's, whoever, because if you start thinking that way, that guy out there could be, your brother, could be your brother or something like that, then it could end up in a situation where you ended up not pulling the trigger. Funny enough, I've heard plenty of stories about how that happened in the Civil War, that they actually started having guys shoot at B-mod targets, human-shaped targets after that, because they learned a lot of guys died without actually firing their weapon because they couldn't bring themselves to draw down on another human being, which I totally get. I understand that. It's not a normal thing to want to kill your fellow man. It's actually a very hard thing to do. So they needed to train guys to actually be able to do that, to be able to pull the trigger on the target. When you're deployed over there, you have, generally it always comes up with the military guys will come up with some word they used to refer to the bad guys. For us, it was Haji. Anyway, we're going to look at this. We've got the Coalition. We are going to check to see if there is a Coalition controlled area that is not garrisoned and whether there is an insurgent militia that can move into it. For us, we only have one set of area. We only have one area, not set of, one area that has any coalition troops in it. That means there is nothing that isn't garrisoned, because obviously my troops there are already garrisoning. So for us, first condition, no go. So we go down to the next condition. That's going to be condition 2 over here. Like, okay, so check to see if there's a coalition area that can be attacked by insurgent militia. For us, that is a yes, because we do have militia that popped up here as a reaction, and they can move in there. So now we conduct a D6 roll to determine whether or not they're going to attack. And then if they don't attack, they do what is called organized resistance. And that's why you have all these cadres spread across the map, because you're going to run into them. Almost any area you're going to run into, they're so spread out, you're going to be adjacent to some cadre. They have the ability to do what's called organized resistance, and that's where they start placing more and more militia on the board. So as you're moving forward with your coalition forces, not only are you going to be attacked pretty much every step of the way, because there's no reason not to attack as the insurgent forces. You pretty much have unlimited forces. You always want to be attacking and weakening the American forces as they're coming on, but you're going to be popping up new oppositional forces, so they're quickly going to multiply across the board. All right, so let's grab our D6 here and roll to see if they're going to attack. And they are not going to attack. 1 to 4 means that they are going to attack. So this militia would have moved in there and attacked the forces. Yes, it would appear to be weak, but again, every single attack conducted by the insurgent forces eliminates those insurgent forces. They always die in the attack. So it doesn't really matter for them. They want to just constantly be putting out hurt pokes, jabs against the coalition forces as they're trying to go on. So for us, we know that they are not going to attack, so we're going to go to step 3. Step 3 is going to be see if there are any cadre units that can organize resistance. And there are cadre forces. We do have cadre forces here and here. There is a little chart here to determine which ones you're going to go for first. It's first going to be a contested area. Contested means it has both sets of forces in it. We don't have anything like that, but we do have cadre forces that are adjacent, and that's the next one. Adjacent to spent coalition forces, and then adjacent to fresh coalition forces. We have spent coalition forces here. For ease, just to save ourselves a little time, because there are militia here and not militia here, I'm going to go ahead and place my little resistance marker. And you place that one just to keep track of where you organize resistance on the previous impulse. So this is going to be the insurgent impulse. They are going to organize resistance, and they're going to place some militia forces there. So you see, boom, they're popping up more forces. So now as I start coming in these directions, there's already a militia there ready to move in. There's going to be a militia here, and they're just going to keep multiplying across the board as you're going on. Now they do have a little set of priorities when it comes to selecting attack. So if they do have multiple options for attack, it does have a list of priorities, like which ones you're going to go to, fresh, spent, what types of forces are there, that type of stuff. And then if it really comes down to it, you can always just roll a D6 if areas are equally tied on which ones can move into the area. So that is going to be our insurgent impulse. They have organized resistance. They'll do that a lot. They're either going to hit you with militia, because militia are very expendable, or they are going to organize the resistance. So now we flip this over. We're not moving it on the impulse track. We just flip it over. So that's how we keep track of which impulse we are on. We did the insurgent, and we're doing the coalition forces. Means we get to go back to our forces. So now I get to pick what I want to do, and I want to call in a fire mission, I believe, because I haven't shown you guys that yet. When it comes to fire missions, you can call them into an area that you are in, an area you are adjacent to, or anywhere adjacent to the entry zones. So pretty much when you start the game, it's all across the northern top of the map. And then as you start pushing down into the map, anywhere that you have forces, you can toss it in there or adjacent. Here's the thing. When it comes to determining, because this is a contested role, just like our combat role was, there modifiers, their defense, it's going to be their highest level of defense plus that terrain effects modifier like it always is. But if you don't have forces in the zone, then they get to double that terrain effects modifier. So let's say I want to call in a fire mission here. It's adjacent to the top and it's adjacent to my forces, so it works in two directions. Now, they have cadre in there, so we would use cadre as their primary factor. They have a 2, and they're an area with a factor of 2. That means that they would get to have that as the lead defensive unit. They get to add that terrain effects modifier. However, they get to double it since I don't have forces in the zone. So they get that extra little bit of a bonus. A fire mission counts as a strength 8. So it's like I have 8 combat points worth of units conducting the attack. I get 8 added to my 2d6 roll. They, however, get 2 plus double their terrain effects modifier, which means they're going to get 6 added to their roll to determine what happens. And again, it's just straight up like a combat on the results, the casualty points and all, and what is done. However, the problem is since I don't have forces here in that zone, I'm doing myself a little bit of a disservice because I incur a political penalty for firing a fire mission in here on top of guys when I don't have anyone in there. All right, so I just double checked it just to make sure, and I actually incurred the penalty because I would have to have a US and an Iraqi force. So either it has to have one of the blue, because the blue is the Iraqi, and then it could either have a tan or a green force there with it. Otherwise, I incur the penalty from a fire mission. When you're attacking the mosque area, you can have just Iraqi forces and not incur the political penalty. But you have to have US and Iraqi forces to conduct the fire mission without incurring the penalty. And I think all Iraqi forces anyway have the parentheses, if I see it correctly. So you wouldn't be conducting an attack with them as a lead unit anyway. So you're pretty much always going to have a coalition and an Iraqi force to attack mosque areas without incurring the political penalty. And there's just no way. There's just not enough blue forces, the Iraqi forces, to mitigate all of the penalty. I just don't think you can swing enough of them. You got 4 that start up here in the upper right and 5 that start up here in the upper left when it comes to the Iraqi forces. And yeah, you can kind of spread them out, but I like the idea of using them as like little garrison guys, kind of leaving them behind because they're not that good anyway, and they weren't that really good in real life. But you need them as you're going through, because otherwise there's no way you can conduct enough attacks to get to the orange areas without incurring a lot of those penalties. And plus you want to garrison these. That's what I'm talking about. There's a lot of tactical decisions that you have to consider as you're moving forces down through. Remember, you're not going to lose units. You never lose units as the coalition forces, but you're spread thin on the amount of areas that you got to try to gain control of. Anyway, let's go ahead and conduct our opposed roll here to see what happens. Remember, we got 6 for the Iraqi forces, 8 for the American forces, and they are getting that double bonus on the TEM because of no one being in there. So we're just tossing in some fire without anyone there to basically coordinate things. We use blue again as Iraqi and red as the American forces. And that's gonna be good. Let's see, what do we get? What do we get? We got 5 plus 11, or 5 versus 11. Okay, so 5, they get to add 6 to it, so that gives them a total of 11. So they're equal there, so they've got 8 points. 8 points is the difference, because I get to add 8 to the red die, the coalition die. So they basically incur 8 points worth of casualty points that you have to deal with. And you can allocate them in certain ways. We can use 3 points to eliminate a Fedayeen or cadre. So that takes care of this guy. This cadre gone. And then, let's see, 2 points for a spent Fedayeen or cadre and 1 point for a militia, fresh or spent. And that would actually be an overrun attack if I was doing a actual attack with the forces instead of a fire mission, because now we still have a good chunk of casualty points left. We got like 4 casualty points left that we could use could apply to the area, but no one that could actually absorb them, that's when an overrun would happen. But that's only if you've actually got forces. So let's say, I actually had forces that came in and were conducting that attack. They could continue on spending movement points and conducting further attacks since they did so good in their attack. In this case, it's just a fire mission. It's just been used for this impulse, but that is our impulse. Again, for the attack, we had an 11. Impulse is 1, so we're not under that, so we know we get to flip over to the next one. So we would go over to 2 and flip this counter back over to the insurgent side to signify the fact that we are doing another insurgent activation. Now, for our purposes, the insurgents more than likely would conduct an attack on this one, since we do have control of an area. We can move in there. They don't have, they still have control of this because we haven't moved any forces in, but we simply have to move forces in to actually gain control of it. But a good thing for the Iraqis to do, or not Iraqis, I keep saying it, the insurgents to do at this point would be to come in here with like the militia forces. Because again, they're zero, they're nothing. It's not about trying to overwhelm the US, the coalition forces. They're not going to. Most attacks are not ever going to be in the insurgents' favor. It's just the fact that it's overwhelming attacks. It's that being pecked to death because it's constant. The odds are kind of in their favor in the fact that even if they're not getting all the extra bonuses, they're constantly hitting you with this attack, this attack, this attack. Eventually, they're going to roll the dice enough that they beat you, and you start incurring those points. And when the U.S., the coalition forces, incur casualty points, they become political point casualties. They come up on there, which, again, you don't want to have. That's going to hurt you in this game because your forces aren't going to be removed. So that's where your casualty points are applied as the coalition. It's signifying the fact that things aren't looking good, and it makes politicians look bad and everything, but politicians look bad anyway. And honestly, that's the game in a gist. That's what you're going to do. You're going to keep going back and forth between the two different impulses, making sure to keep track like we would be on the coalition on the next impulse. When the next time they activated, we have to keep track of their attack to see what die they rolled. And when they do roll under to wherever we are on the impulse track, that's when the turn's going to end. So if they roll low, then boom, we're kicking over to November 9th and then repeating the whole process. So we're not guaranteed 12 or 13 impulses as the coalition. That can end real quick. So you're constantly going to be flicking back and forth. And like I said, you start off strong as the coalition because you've got all your forces bunched up in a few small areas, and you can hit real hard so you can gain control of these upper areas relatively easily because all your forces are bunched. You've got all your bonuses all applied at the same area. Great, cool, pretty much overwhelming all the whole time. But as you start pushing through, you see the closest objective point. We got one here, we've got one here, but after that you're getting fairly into the center of the city to get to these victory objective triangles that you're actually trying to gain control of. And you can't just shoot in with a whole group of forces. You've got to leave people behind to garrison those other areas as you're moving through so you don't get cut off. You don't get surrounded. The militia don't come back in and take control of those areas behind you. And remember, you're getting points for all these areas that you control. So you're constantly taking points away from the insurgent forces. So you want to hold as much as possible, especially these orange triangles, but it's just how best to do that. Ultimately, when it comes to this game, I gotta say, I think they did a really good job with simulating it. Like I said, I haven't seen a game before where you didn't have to worry about losing counters, that your forces could never technically be defeated or taken off the board, but you're trying to avoid that political backlash that could happen by constantly taking minor casualties per se. Not enough to reduce your combat strength, but enough to make things look kind of bad. Honestly, this plays kind of similar, but I mean, a little different, but it reminds me of the States of Siege type games where you have this small, strong force fighting against an overwhelming mob type force, which is the combat that they're trying to simulate going on here. And that's honestly what they were dealing with, you know, just constant attacks by forces that were weaker, but they didn't have to be strong because it was just enough to peck. You take out a Humvee here, a track there, a guy here, a guy there. Eventually, all that starts to add up, and they're not worried about the casualties they're taking, just the casualties that they're inflicting. I have to say, I am rather impressed with this being a magazine game. There is a fair amount of good gameplay here, something that would definitely occupy your time for not a whole lot of cost, and you could definitely have a lot of fun with it. And one of the few that I've seen like this where it can be played either heads up or solitaire, and I've actually seen it play better solitaire than heads up. Usually it doesn't go that way. Usually a game that can be played both ways will lean better towards heads up play, but this one, it really works well as a solitaire game. They've developed a good system here to operate the insurgent forces to kind of make you feel that overwhelming pressure as you're moving in with your coalition forces. Again, I like the option of having the fire mission because obviously they had access to stuff like that. But simulated in game, yeah, you can basically have a free attack per se and not have to worry about moving your forces. But again, that comes into play with the fact that the impulses are not guaranteed and you can end up having a turn end. And how many turns do you want to waste just calling in fire missions? Yeah, you might take some troops off the board, but, I mean, how big of a deal is it? The next turn, they could just organize reinforcements and boom, they put the troops right back on the board and you still haven't gained any ground. And in this game, it's all about gaining the ground. Ultimately, this one, I gotta say, has changed my opinion on magazine games. And it's not that I haven't liked magazine games. I definitely have played a few of them before and had fun with them. But this one is a really good quality components. I mean, it is magazine game quality components, so keep that in mind. You know, paper matte and the whole like in the rule books in the magazine itself. So it's not as easy to, you know, have everything out. But for what it is, absolute excellent gameplay, excellent map. I love the fact that they have the actual aerial photo and that's what they designed the map based around what you're actually going after. It's so cool to see this, you know, from the overhead view. Because I saw a map just like this when I was sitting in our COC looking at our big board of the area of operations and what all we had going on. And, you know, it looked just like this. It's kind of cool to see this on my own table at home, you know? Anyway, I know this was a quick review. I didn't get to show you a whole huge amount of the game, but I wanted to show you the basics of how it did operate so you can make the decision for yourself. But I have enjoyed it, and I definitely would recommend it if you are interested. Like I said, you can get it from Paper Wars by Compass Games. And which issue is this? Issue 103, second Fallujah. So if you're interested, make sure you check that out. And like I said, you know, you get the magazine subscription, so it's kind of a bonus on top of the game that you get. So cool. I like it. And you can see that there are plenty of other games and magazines that they have going on. All right, you guys take care. I will catch you in the next one.